I'm Rose Garofano, your host, and today we sit down with a man whose story is as humbling as it is inspiring. Abhishek Malik was a quiet, bookish kid growing up, but life had other plans. At just 22, he was diagnosed with aggressive tongue cancer, a diagnosis that would change everything. What followed wasn't just a fight for survival, but the beginning of a relentless pursuit to test his limits and give back.
It's easy to fall back, and that was something that was sort of front and center when I had that cancer diagnosis was, am I doing enough and am I being true to myself? The answer was no. And so I had to sort of pull myself together and be like, hey, this is something that I need to change.
From swimming the English Channel to racing across the Sahara in 50-degree heat, raising thousands for cancer charities along the way, Abhishek has become a symbol of resilience and bold ambition. He's volunteered with SES, founded his own Outback lifestyle brand, and now serves on the board of the Mental Fitness Collective, championing mental health advocacy across Australia. With Mount Everest in his sights for 2026 and a mission to help others push past adversity, this is a conversation about courage, clarity, and what happens when you decide you want more from life.
UThink is sponsored by Vuvali, a living experience where you can work, learn, play and connect. Visit vuvali.com.au.
I'm Rose Garofano, and over the years of being an educator and connector, I've had the privilege of talking with a vast array of incredible individuals who inspire and create meaningful impact across the globe through their words and actions. UThink is my opportunity to engage with these remarkable people to bring out the best in them. My hope is that through these conversations, we can all be inspired to achieve our own greatness and make a meaningful impact in our world. Well, welcome, Abhishek. Thank you for coming and being a guest on UThink. And for the people who are going to be listening and watching this interview, you were a student at a school that I was a teacher at.
Yeah, exactly. And you reached out on LinkedIn, and I was thinking, that profile picture looks like my old English coordinator from year 7 and 8, and it took a bit of thinking to just sort of
put it together.
And I have a vivid memory of you actually substituting in and all the boys being scared of the English coordinator instead of our normal English teacher. So it's
I know, that's
quite
so
a surreal
funny.
journey to sort of be back here.
Well, how I got your name was that my husband, who still teaches at Parramatta Marist, he came home and he said the principal, Dr. Gavin Hayes, had decided he wanted to motivate the Year 12s. And he reached back out through the alumni and heard about your story and about what you've been doing. And he said, Rose, the teachers that were in the room came out and they said that it was amazing. And of course, I love hearing amazing stories and I believe they need to be shared. So I said, okay, what was his name? And he said it was Abhishek. And you're right. So I didn't teach you, but you had the wonderful Ashik Anand as your English teacher. And I used to substitute, and people have told me I was scary.
Yeah, I think when you're in year 7, any teacher who has sort of seniority in the school ends up being sort of, that kind of figure. So
I was tough. But all for all the right reasons.
Yeah.
And we're not having that relationship today. We're actually having a different relationship, which is I get to sit back and listen to you talk about your amazing journey, and you have an amazing journey. But before we get into where you're at today and where you've and your super goal, which is going to be exciting for 2026, and that's Nepal, we'll come to that, is your beginnings. So I read, and when we met actually for a coffee to have a bit of a chat and see if you felt comfortable to come on the particular episode, you talked about the fact, and it still sticks in my mind, that you said you were a pretty average student. You were just an average young man.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the sort of story we tell ourselves and that internal dialogue we had, or we have rather. And growing up, I think mine wasn't super positive or filled with a lot of drive and sort of self-belief. And so the person that I saw myself as in high school was maybe someone with lots of dreams, but, kind of always falling short of putting that effort in. So whether that was at school, there was always enough talent to get me sort of maybe in the 90th percentile or the 85th percentile of students, but then not the work ethic to sort of go further than that. And it was the same thing at sports. I'd have the talent to make it into the teams, represent the school or play outside, in club sports, but then never really took it any further than that. And that sort of chip on my shoulder has always sort of been there. And I think that, growing up, I always felt like there was a lot of potential that was sort of just being squandered away.
Why do you think that? Why do you think you or boys of your age, of that age, fall short of their potential?
I'm not too sure. I think for me it was just the distractions that we had, and I just, even today I sort of struggle with finding that balance of enjoying time with my mates and then committing to, doing the things that I've done, and I just like having a good time, and so nowadays I'm trying to be a bit kinder to myself and lean into that and allow myself the space to be able to have that healthy relationship with having a bit of fun, but also then when it gets time to do it, do the work.
I think it's normal for young boys to not want to strive early, as in, as you said, to be allowed to be distracted by their mates or by sport and things like that. But I think what struck me was what you said is that you didn't really want to do more than that at the time. You just were happy. You was happy to sit back a little bit.
I think I did want to, but I think it comes back down to, one of the things we talked about in high school English, nature versus nurture. And so I think maybe, everyone in my family and sort of my extended family, I don't know if there's lots of people that sort of, I do have, cousins and that have a lot of drive, but I think that as a household, my parents tried to instill a work ethic, but it just didn't stick for some reason. And then so I've had to sort of build that into myself as I've gotten older and more emotionally mature. So that's sort of what I've been working at over the last sort of 5-6 years.
So you finished school, you went to university.
Yeah.
What did you select?
I was good at maths, and so engineering was sort of the obvious choice for me. I loved cars. In fact, I'd be sitting around in high school, when the teacher wasn't looking, I'd flip the page and I'd be drawing cars. And so for me, it was the obvious choice. I wanted to build stuff, make stuff. I was really good at that. I was kind of creative, so I thought, engineering might be a good way to sort of explore that creative outlet whilst also being technical. And then, went to UNSW to study a mechanical engineering degree. And then about 2.5-3 years in, moved over to UTS. And that's sort of when I was like, okay, I'm going to add physics to the mix and really sort of, explore my academic aptitude. But yeah, that's sort of when the cancer came around, and yeah.
So it was halfway through your degree?
Yeah, I was just starting third year. A fourth year of university, but I'd taken some time off, worked part-time, that sort of thing as you do. And it was just after my 22nd birthday that I sort of found out that I had cancer. I was planning a trip to Europe with my friends, and I noticed a bite mark on my tongue. The first vivid memory I have of it is just going into the bathroom, looking in the mirror and seeing like a small, essentially a bite mark, like a bit in my tongue. And kind of ignored it, and then, realized it was there 5-6 days later, turned into about 10 days, because you sort of ignore these things. The mouth heals pretty quickly. By the time I got to the doctors, I think it was maybe 3 weeks into that first moment of realization that I'd maybe bitten my tongue. And then the doctor, just saw like a small ulcer and sort of didn't really give it much weight as you would for a 22-year-old non-smoker and, someone who's quite fit and active, so that was sort of...
They just give you some topical stuff like some...
Exactly right, yeah. They
like
just
a
give
gel
you some,
or something.
Yeah, and so in my mind what was happening, if you've ever like applied that gel on like your skin, you sort of apply it outside the area, like it sort of doesn't just touch the ulcer or the, like the wart or whatever you've got. And so it kind of spreads around a little bit. And so what I thought was the ointment spreading on my tongue was actually the tumor growing in hindsight. But, neither myself, I'm not a medical student, or the doctor sort of picked that. And it's kind of interesting because the reason why it got escalated was because I had, I was unwell, I'd missed a university quiz or something like that, and I needed to go get a doctor's certificate. And I went in and I was like, hey, I need a certificate because I missed my quiz and I need to show the university, and I need to, by the way, I'm here, so can you please send me to a specialist? It's been like 5-6 weeks and the ulcer's still there.
Wow.
And
but were you having other symptoms? Because obviously there was this...
Nothing else. It was just a tiny...
fatigue?
Nothing. It was just a tiny little ulcer on my tongue. And it's sort of interesting in hindsight because I think oftentimes I fall victim to this. I'm really, really hard on myself, and I feel like I'm not doing enough, even though you might think from an outside perspective that now I am. But I always thought, I could be doing more, and we sort of question why we're in a certain point in our lives. And had I not sort of been, had I not missed that quiz or not showed up to the doctors, I would have not gone to the specialist who was going on leave for 2 weeks. And I saw him the day after I went to the GP, and he's like, go get scans done. So in that 2-week period, I booked an MRI, a CT, all that sort of stuff, got the scans done. And then as soon as he saw me on the after his leave, he was like, okay, I want to do a biopsy within the week. So in that 3-week turnaround, I had scans, biopsy, all done. And then we knew straight away that it was a cancer.
It would have been a shock to hear that word.
It was, the doctor told me I had a squamous cell carcinoma, and I was stoked because I just thought that like cancer was called cancer. So I was like, all right, sweet. So I can go to Europe with the boys. And he's like, yeah, maybe not, mate. we're going to have to take this out. And the 3 weeks that followed, specialist appointments with head and neck surgeons, all that sort of stuff. And then my surgery was sort of locked in for about, I think, 3-4 weeks after that biopsy. And within that period, the tumor had doubled in size. And so it was
growing fast.
It's so interesting that, had I not gone when I went and sort of, missed that quiz, and, I was sort of struggling with motivation at university. So it was, I can't remember if I was sick or if I was just missed the quiz because I was, sort of going through a bit of a rough patch. And, that's kind of what saved me, because when you're looking at the tongue, it's such a small organ. There's not a lot of margin for error for a tumor that's doubling in size in 3 weeks, right? So that's the difference between being able to eat, being able to speak, being able to, just have a quality of life that's considered quite normal. And the surgery involved taking taking a lot more of the tumor out than, to get that margin of safety. And so they had to replace tissue from my tongue with tissue from my hip, and then they cleared out most of my neck as well, all the lymph nodes. So it's quite a delicate area to be playing with. And, I kind of got lucky that it was just on that borderline of stage 2.
It sounds like it was really fast too, but the process, once you got to the point of diagnosis,
yeah,
the next 2, 3 or 4 weeks were fast.
Super fast, such a whirlwind. And that's sort of when I was so grateful that my parents sort of decided to come to Australia, and we had access to such a fantastic public health system. Like I remember saying to the doctor, I've been saving for this trip to Europe, so I have money aside, and if it means anything, I'll pay for the surgery. Let's get it done. And he said to me, this is like one of the top 5 surgeons in the country, and he said, don't worry, mate, you're a high priority case. We'll get you through. And
it's funny you say that, because when my brother was 21, he was diagnosed with leukemia. And my parents almost had the same question of the doctor. If we need to take him overseas somewhere, because Australia doesn't have the medical, either knowledge or facilities, we will. And at the time, my brother Max's doctor, Dr. Bradstock, he was the leading leukemia specialist, he just paused and he said, you have to understand, Australia is fabulous for its medical processes, its knowledge and its determination to advance through these processes. Please do not take your child out of this country. So it's a funny thing that we immediately want to make sure that we're getting the best.
Yeah,
and we have it here.
100%. I mean, you want second opinions, you want third opinions, and it was just, luck or divine providence, whatever you want to call it, that I sort of landed on Dr. Carsten Palm's sort of doorstep, and he was the main guy everyone we went to was like, who's your initial consult? And then once they heard it was Dr. Palm, they were like, well, he's the guy you want. So
that's so good.
Got kind of lucky there, and like you said, it's we're so lucky. Like the doctors have still, whenever I need or anything comes up, or if there's an issue, I send the office an email, and I'm straight back in the in the clinic.
So did you go to Westmead Hospital?
So I had my surgery at Chris O'Brien Lifehouse.
Oh, okay.
Which is also interesting because Dr. Chris O'Brien was a Marist old boy, and he came and spoke whilst we were at school as well at some point.
He did.
And so that was kind of an interesting thing to sort of be, getting treatment and surgery rather at a hospital that was named after him. And then after that, once the surgery was done, I then sort of had a couple of reviews with the doctors, and they weren't happy with a couple of things that they saw, you know, in the anatomy of the tumor, and they said, well, you should probably get radiotherapy too. So I had come out of the hospital in the ICU with a trachea, so that's a breathing pipe in your trachea, and couldn't really talk for about 4 or 5 days, and then couldn't eat solid food for about, I think, for the next 20 days. And then they were like, all right, I think it was the day that they cleared me, the surgeons cleared me to eat food, was when the oncologist was like, well, we're starting your treatment like in 2 days, so you need to get your teeth pulled out. So we had to get my wisdom teeth pulled out because they didn't want to do that after radiotherapy because it becomes harder to heal. And so I just had chips for like a 2-month period. The only solid food I could eat was like chips, and then back into radiotherapy.
So do you have trauma now when you see chips? Or
Not
okay?
anymore. I've actually come around to it, but there was a period there with radiotherapy where it was, I guess, not akin to, or not dissimilar rather to the aversion sort of pregnant women have with certain foods based on smells and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, chips and there were certain foods during, I think, weeks 4 to 7 or 8 of radiotherapy where I just didn't want to eat them. And then I lost all my taste as well. So I would smell all this amazing food.
But you couldn't taste it.
And it was just cardboard. So I'm kind of stoked that I can eat chocolate, because I think for about a 6-month period, I did not want to smell chocolate or hot chips at all. Like it was.
And I don't think people realise when you are diagnosed with something like a cancer, all of the things that come with it. As you just said, in order to have radiotherapy, you had to have your wisdom teeth taken out. Now, that's not an easy process, and that's painful. And then there's all of the consequences of the radiotherapy, as you said, loss of taste and the food, not being able to eat certain foods. And so it must have been arduous for you.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, it's. I think one thing that, like, as people, we often, like, you know, humans sort of just kind of gloss over the past, you know, quite easily. Like, oh, it's happened. But yeah, in the moment, it was definitely not easy. I also had a feeding tube put straight into my upper, I guess, intestine or lower esophagus. I don't really know the anatomy there, but just up in my abdominal region to sort of avoid having to eat food.
And also put pressure on the area that's been
exactly right.
touched by the surgery.
Yeah, and because it was just too painful to even to eat at some points. And so you're sort of trying to manage, you know, being strong for yourself and to get through it, but then you've got your family around. My younger sister was going through a HSC, so for her to sort of see her big brother going through that obviously made a big impact on her. So I had to be strong because she had her exams and all that kind of thing. So, you know, everyone
There's
in
secondary
the family
trauma
unit,
for the family.
100%.
We had it for 5 years. He had a bone marrow transplant. It took him 5 years to finally get the all clear. But for 5 years, anti-rejection drugs and the follow-ups and the ups and downs, and the family really does feel it. It's not as much in terms of physically, but certainly emotionally and in terms of culturally for us, it was a huge impact.
Yeah, and I think, you know, different cultures sort of deal with it in different ways, and we never really spoke about it as an Indian family. We didn't really talk about, like, sort of the emotional side of things. It was just sort of everyone knows they've got a job to do, and we're just all just going to do that for ourselves, but also for everyone else. But yeah, it was, you know, there was periods during radiotherapy where just the sensation of your tongue resting on the back of your teeth was like a 12 out of 10 pain. And so I couldn't talk for, you know, days on end. I think there was maybe a week or so where I'd just want to hang out with friends and I'd have the laptop out and I'd be talking to them that way. But it was definitely really, really hard. I lost hair as well from the treatment, which, you know, in the grand scheme of things isn't really much to sort of go through, but it's crazy because you sort of think, oh, I'll be okay, I'll be sweet, I'm different. And then the hair starts to fall and you realize, you know, everyone sort of goes through this, you know, and that's sort of that quote unquote sort of cancer patient.
And did you
moment.
have a group of really close friends that?
I was so fortunate. You know, Morris boys, close friends of mine. The first thing I did as soon as I found out was tell them that, you know, I've got a very small family. It's just me, mum, dad, and my little sister here in Australia. So no direct family beyond them, no extended family either. And so my mates really are my family, and I was so grateful to have them be at the hospital. I wasn't expecting anything, but I had a couple of friends that were there every day, after work, every day without fail. And that makes a difference to your your mental well-being and your sort of your belief that, things are going to be okay, or your ability to be distracted and just to talk about normal things and not think about what's going on in the hospital setting. So,
were you in a ward with other people of your age? Because would you consider it a young adult?
Yeah. So I luckily I was at the Lifehouse, and so I had an individual room, and so we could, we always had a little bit of a posse in the room, which was kind of fun. People were coming to visit. But then with radiotherapy and sort of the procedures that followed my major surgery, it was in Westmead Hospital, and so that was sort of more of a shared setting. And yeah, those sort of settings, it's just everyone's
hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to see as a patient as well. I can't imagine being someone taking me through, like my parents or my sister or someone who would be taking me through for radio. But yeah, there's also a little bit of hope. Sometimes you have conversations with people and you connect with other patients, and you joke around about stuff or whatever it is, and there's that connection.
The same. My brother was in a special ward because when you have a bone marrow, they have to isolate you for infections, and I was his donor, so they had to put me in the adolescence ward at Westmead. So shared with people who are 12 through to about that early 20s. Who, for whatever reason, are in hospital due to either cancers or accidents. And I was when I say I was there as the donor, so I wasn't there as a result of an accident. I was giving. But my process was challenging in its own way in terms of recovery. But I remember feeling guilty because I'd get up to, walk, and I'd walk past the other people in this ward, and there were people who'd had serious motorbike accidents. There was a young man who was a farmer, a child, he lived on a farm with his parents, and he'd lost his arm by going in to reach for something, and his arm got caught in the tractor. And, and so I remember feeling quite guilty because I was like, I'm not as sick as them. But I watched, like you said, the way they were so resilient and determined to heal and to be positive when they had so much ahead of them as their journey.
Yeah, I think, when you're in that moment, I think a lot of people react that sort of way, and their focus is really short term, just to try and get through it and to do the things that will make that process or that experience a bit easier. I guess, yeah, it's sort of, it is hard to, it's sort of almost like a survivor's guilt there, where you're trying to, we always compare ourselves to other people, but I think it's important to try and stop yourself when you have those thoughts, because everyone's got their own experience.
Everyone's journey and everyone's story is valid, regardless.
But that connection, I think, is really, really important. And for me, I was so fortunate to have friends who were there for me exactly, when I needed them, and I had this really great support network. But And fortunate in a really fortunate way, no one really had that experience with cancer or with like a chronic illness or anything like that. And that connection and having that sort of shared trauma, I guess, it makes such a big difference in being able to process it yourself. And so after I sort of got better 6 to 8 months after the surgery and treatment, I reached out to Canteen Australia, who's an organisation that was there, and they offered sort of social workers and support staff to, call, or they'll pop into the hospital when you're in the ward. But it's an organisation that supports young people affected by cancer. It could be, people that are in the same situation as you were, with a close family member who had the cancer, maybe a brother or a parent. But I joined the leadership team there, and it was such a special thing because we never actually talked about why we were there, but we all knew that there was that thing that brought us there. And that connection is so important, because you understand that people can empathize with parts of your journey. And that sort of, I really felt like, okay, I'd been up until that point in my life, I'd been really taking things, for granted, maybe coasting through and just, going through the motions and not really sort of having any intention. But I was like, hey, these guys are doing something really cool, and
you wanted to give back.
And I wanted to give back. And also, just as someone who was on the older end of that age spectrum that Canteen supports, I think it's 12 to 26. I was 22, 23. And I felt like, okay, well, maybe I can sort of develop into a bit of a mentor for the young people.
But so when you recovered, did you go back and finish your uni degree?
Yeah, that was the priority. I think if you look at my grades up until the cancer, they're kind of pretty average. But then afterwards, I was doing, you traditionally do 4 subjects a semester. I was doing summer school, winter school, 5 subjects a semester. I was just pumping through it because I was like, I've wasted too much time here, and I'm too far in now to not finish. But I'm also getting to the older end of the spectrum, and I don't want to be like a mature age student hanging around here, and I want to start working and sort of make this university degree pay off. And so I focused 2017 and 18 to just absolutely pump through uni, which was great. And that sort of, allowed me to sort of get, slot back into my prior routine, to sort of realign my priorities. And I was able to volunteer with Canteen for the next year and a half and sort of figure out, I had all these ideas when you have treatment for a cancer, whether it's radiotherapy or chemo, it's often just, you're called a cancer survivor. People say you're fighting it, but you're just hanging around, really. The doctors and the drugs are doing most of the work for you. So there's a lot of time to think. And I was doing lots of thinking. And so it was good to, sort of slot back in. And then once I'd had a bit of time to sort of figure out what my routine was going to be and get into the rhythms of university life again, that's when I sort of decided, okay, well, we need to really use this experience that could be quite a catalyst for change. It kind of felt wrong to let it just.
So it was like an internal
away.
calling for you, like you felt that there was this experience that you'd been through.
Yeah.
And you said you made connections with others, and this was an opportunity to maybe bring, as you said, maybe a spotlight to it, but also that active support.
Yeah, and just talk about it and give back. And I'd kind of decided whilst I was going through treatment that the way that I'd do that was I'd always looked up to people in the public space, Bear Grylls or, adventurers of the like. I'd watch Discovery Channel or National Geographic documentaries all the time. And for me, the one thing that was missing, and I think every guy has this, was they always think that they can still become a sports person even at a later age. And so I thought, hey, well, maybe that ship sailed. I'm not going to become a professional athlete anymore. I'm not playing cricket for Australia. But what I can do is maybe pursue some of this adventure stuff and use that to, really rally the community and get people behind me and give back to amazing organizations like Canteen Australia who were there to support me and probably provided a service that I wasn't really engaged with before. And so I felt the need to tell people about it because there are so many people even now that I talk to them, they don't really understand what's available to them. We have so many organizations here in Australia, Red Kite, Camp Quality, that are there to support people going through this.
And that's part of this, isn't it? It's about educating people, letting people know what they can. They're not alone in this journey. And you said your parents and your sibling are the only ones here in Australia. We're similar. Yep. Mum and Dad came out with their 2 little boys, my brothers, and had me here in Australia. I'm the only Aussie.
It's my sister too, yeah.
Yeah, the Italians call me the kangaroo of the family. And so when you are like that, when you actually don't have an extended family, you can feel quite isolated. So it is the extended family, or in our case, it was the Italian community that really rallied around us. And similarly for my brother, some of his friends really rallied and others didn't know how to deal with it. I think we've come a long way. His leukemia was over 30 years ago, and it was almost a bit like, I don't know what to do with it. So they sort of withdrew.
I think that happens in every case. I think that happened for me as well. But, for every person that, maybe it was too overwhelming for them, you don't want to put the blame on people because you don't know how they deal with things.
100%, it would have been.
But, for every person that maybe took a step back or, wasn't there, someone else showed up, that you weren't expecting to be at the hospital, and you're like, oh, hey, it's so good to see you here. And so, that's just life. I think that's just how things go. But it is that, that conversation of, okay, how do I support someone? I've got a mate who's going through this. How do I support them? And just talking about that stuff, I guess, having the courage to go volunteer with Canteen and learn a lot of these skills. We learned how to become effective leaders, how to talk about our journey, our story, how to share that, and how to, really advocate for, the issue of supporting young people. It sort of gave me the confidence to then, as I pursue my adventure goals, to to have those conversations, you know. And I think that it's so important because really it's not much, but people are afraid to ask, you know. It's just have a chat and be like, hey, how you feeling? How was treatment today? Or
And
how
also,
do you know, that's all it is. And it's just the presence.
So one thing, it's 100% knowing that they're not alone, as you said, and just being able to maybe articulate how they're feeling is one thing. But also you might give them hope to pursue their own thing, the thing that they may not have wanted to pursue or thought they couldn't pursue.
Yeah.
You know, challenge themselves to think outside of their own limitations. So let's go there, because I think this is the next part of your journey. What was the first challenge that or adventure you pursued? And you were doing it to raise both awareness and funds.
Yeah.
But what was the first one and why?
Whilst I was going through treatment, I watched many an episode of Man vs. Wild and many a documentary, and I remember watching one. There was a Britain's Got Talent host, David Williams. He swam the English Channel for, I think, Comic Relief or something like that. And I was like, this is incredible, because I'd heard about this swim, and this guy, you know, has a professional career as a comedian and a TV personality. And
You thought if he could do it.
I was so inspired. I thought that was incredible. And I did think that if he could do it, then surely I could do something like that. And then Bear Grylls, the host of Man vs. Wild, was at the time the youngest Brit to climb Everest. And then somewhere in the middle of that, I watched this documentary about, I think it was a British rower, and, you know, this tall, strapping 6'5" blonde guy, and he comparing his physiology to a Moroccan runner in the desert. And they were comparing it on this race, this, you know, 6-7 day ultra marathon through the Sahara. So I guess during this period, sort of, you know, being reintroduced to these challenges, and I thought, well, I didn't actually think that I could do them, but I told myself that that's what I would do. I would do these three things. I didn't tell anyone else, and then I started volunteering with Canteen because I figured, you know, let's start giving back and let's get back into university, and then eventually let's try and do these things. And then in 2018, I sort of, after a year of recovery in 2017, I had to sort of stop myself, because when you're sick, the first thing you want to do is sort of be normal again. And my normal was a guy who was taking things for granted. So and sort of just going through the motions, and I kind of caught myself after about a year and was like, hey, you know, you're back to sort of hanging out, socializing, partying, you know, the effects of, you know, the acute symptoms of the radio and everything like that have sort of gone away. And by and large, beyond the residual fatigue, you're kind of back to your normal self. And
it's easy to fall back into that.
And it's easy to fall back. And that was something that was sort of front and center when I had that cancer diagnosis was, am I doing enough, and am I being true to myself? And the answer
am
was,
I living my life?
The answer was no. And so I had to sort of pull myself together and be like, hey, this is something that I need to change. And so I decided that I'll fundraise for Canteen Australia, and I'm going to go swim the English Channel, because I was still at university. I probably couldn't afford to climb Everest, and I frankly hated running, so the Sahara run was not an option. And so I thought, okay, well, we can swim the channel, and I knew that there needed to be a sense of urgency because of my sort of habits that I had and the kind of person that I was. I knew that if I give myself too much of a runway, it just won't happen. And so early 2018, I decided I'll swim the channel in 2019, in the winter of 2019 in Australia, which is a summer over in the UK.
It's not that much of a summer in the UK, but
It's
anyway.
not. It's as I learned, it's the warmest it gets in the UK in the summer is our coldest, is our winter. So our winter is their warmest. So if you've ever gone for a swim in the Sydney beaches in July, August, that's what swimming the channel is like, but for around 12 to 14 hours, and you're not allowed a wetsuit. You're not allowed...
Because there's all these rules around it.
All these rules, because, you know, why make it easy when it can be even harder? So, yeah, that's
only 250 or 255 Australians.
Something like that. Yeah, I think I was number 236 individual swimmers. So there's people who've gone back and done it more than once, because that's a thing as well. But yeah, I think that from memory, the 230 or 40th Australian, and only the 53rd. I can't really claim that I'm Indian anymore, but, you know, I fly the Aussie flag wherever I go. But yeah, only 53 Indians have done it. So it was kind of crazy to even get to France. Like I remember telling people that I'm going to swim the channel, and, you know, mates who'd swim or who'd swam squad or represented the school or whatever, or gone to nationals, or they'd be like, well, you know, it's going to take you like 3-4 years. And I was like, no, I'm doing it next year. And I would get laughs. Coaches would tell me it's not possible. But I just knew that, all right, even if this is an inevitable failure, I'm still 10 steps ahead of the guy that got diagnosed with this cancer 2 years ago, because that bloke would have never even tried to do any of this. So for me, it was never about swimming the channel. It was about being intentional and having purpose and drive and doing something bigger and giving back to the community and talking about these important things.
But it would have been physically, you had to do a lot of training.
Oh, I lived in the pool. I lived in the pool basically 5-6 days a week, and then on the weekends I would slowly start swimming in the ocean. I hadn't swum in the ocean before I started training for the channel, so I had to then learn how to swim in the ocean. So I remember going to Manly for my first time. I had 2 mates that took me out, and there's a club, an open club that swims out there. It's called the Bold and the Beautiful. It's a really great community, and I went out, and clearly, like, just, you know, someone who doesn't belong in that sort of community, like, you know, my body language, my behavior, and it was a overcast day. I think they start at like 6:30 and 7 are the sort of kickoffs, and I was terrified. It was kind of choppy. I went in, waded in, and I was like, no, I'm not. I'm waiting for the sun to come out. And a lady came up to me. She's like, are you okay? Do you know how to swim? And I was like, not really, but, you know, we'll figure it out. And then I swam from Manly to Shelley Beach, and it was kind of bumpy, but I had my mates with me, so I was comfortable. And I just thought to myself, this is 650 meters and the channel's 33 kilometers. Like, how is this even possible? But, you know, slowly just sort of broke it down and kept swimming more and more and more. And
did you do it all in one setting? You had to swim the channel in one setting?
Yeah. So you can't stop swimming. You can't touch. You have a little fishing trawler that guides you through the shipping lane. So the English Channel is quite a busy shipping lane, massive 200, 150 meter cargo container ships that go northbound as you leave England and southbound as you approach France. And so you have to navigate those boats. And then also there's a massive current as well. So effectively you're swimming from England to France, but you're getting pushed sideways for 6 hours and then sideways again down south. And so you have a fishing trawler that's with you and sort of, you know, you have your food on that, but you can't touch the boat. There's an observer on the boat that makes sure you're following all the rules.
So you have to swim the whole time, or you can
stop swimming. And so for
float?
Every swimmer has their own protocol. For me, it was every half an hour I'd stop and have a feed, and that involved a little carbohydrate mix in a protein bottle, and that was like strapped to some cord and thrown out to me. And so I'd quickly drink that. That was a 20 to 30 second pause. But in that pause, you can't stop swimming, because if you can imagine a current's pushing you sideways and you stop, and then you have to swim back straight, you have to swim against the current. So you have to kind of side stroke the whole time that you're getting fed and you're getting sort of key information.
I'm not a swimmer, but I'm visually already struggling to imagine this.
And you have to drink you just quickly you drink the water or the mixture or whatever it is at depending on the feed. We had a whole schedule, and then it's like, okay, mate, you're swimming well, kick faster, do this. Water temperature's looking good, conditions are going to get better in an hour. Okay, head down, keep swimming for another half an hour. And it's totally different to anything else, because, you know, if you go for a 5K run, you can listen, you can hear the sounds. All you hear when you're swimming is like the slapping of the water against your ears.
So you can't even wear headphones in there at all?
Nothing, because the water's too violent.
Did you see fish underneath?
It's the well, I did towards the end of the swim, but the first half of the swim was quite murky. We'd had a bit of rain for the week preceding, and the English waters aren't known to be the most crystal clear, so I didn't really see much. But you also start to swim at 3 a.m, so you start in the dark and then you swim out because
what mental resilience you would have to have.
Or just foolishness and naivete, I think. But hey, it got me out of the boat into the water, and then just at that point, the only option was really to keep swimming. I quit a whole bunch of times after about 10, 11, 12 hours into the swim. But my parents wanted to be on the boat, and so they just told me to keep swimming. I had a mate, Dave, who's a really strong swimmer, and I told him, give me a week of your a week of your Europe trip. I'll pay for everything. I just need you on the boat, because my parents, bless them, they're there for moral support, but they know nothing about swimming. And so he would just tell me to shut up and keep swimming. And when you've been doing that for 10 hours, you don't really have the mental capacity to argue with someone. So you just shut up and keep swimming. And so I did that. And yeah, to answer the question about the fish, I swam through probably thousands of jellyfish in that last 45 minutes of the swim. And you're wearing speedos, so you're swimming through them and you're getting stung. But that's...
Okay, I was hoping you would say I saw Nemo or something like that. But no, you saw jellyfish and you swam
through a whole school, from fist size to beach ball sized jellyfish, yeah.
Wow. So then you hit the shores of France. It's an achievement.
Yeah,
you would have been exhausted.
I was broken. I was completely stretched thin. It was by far one of the hardest things I'd done, probably on par with that period of radiotherapy where it was quite tough, to sort of give you a perspective of how challenging radiotherapy can be as well. And really there was no other intention. I mean, I knew maybe I'd run the Desert Ultra one day, or I'd, climb Everest was on the cards, but you've just done something so big and monumental for yourself. It was never really anything. But then, as often happens with these kinds of things, if you've ever signed up for a 10K or a 5K, as soon as you're recovered, you're thinking about the next thing. So
you do.
3 days later, as soon as my shoulders could move my arms above, my head, I was thinking, all right, well, maybe I can do another swim and another swim.
And you raised some very valuable funds for Canteen?
Yeah, we raised $22,000, which I was super stoked with. I didn't really do much marketing or anything like that. It was just sort of put it out in the community and sort of let that, do its thing. And I was thinking, if I get $5,000 here, I'll be stoked. And so it was incredible to have everyone follow along the swim. Or we did like Facebook Live, Instagram Live, that sort of thing. And sort of, get behind me. Like people would say, I went to work, I came home and you were still swimming, and then I woke up in the morning and you were still swimming. It took me 14 and a half hours. So it was quite a long swim, but I was so chuffed to be able to do that.
Okay, before I go on, let's take a quick break for a message from our sponsors.
UThink is sponsored by Vuvali, a living experience where you can work, learn, play and connect. Choose your own private living space or share with others. To learn more, visit vuvali.com.au.
Once I got back home, I started full-time work, and then sort of that took priority and sort of became the focus. And then I got laid off end of 2023, and I kind of, had dabbled in a couple of triathlons here and there during COVID. And then I thought, hey, I've got this opportunity here. And the Marathon des Sables, which is a desert ultra marathon that I sort of thought I'd do, was in the following April, which is again quite a short period to go from, maybe running, once a week, once every 2 weeks, to running 250K in a week. But when you sort of push your limits, you're built with this belief that you can do more, and you sort of have a capability. And so I was like, well, I can try and figure it out. And again, I fundraised for Canteen there as well. So that was pretty special too.
So you actually completed that?
Yeah. So I on 4 and a bit months prep, willed myself through the Sahara. We had temperatures starting on day one. It's a stage race, so it's 250 kilometers through the desert, and you have a set amount of kilometers you have to run every day and a set course. So,
but not by hour, so you can take it your time?
There is a cutoff. So if you don't make the cutoff, you're out of the race. The cutoffs are quite lenient because they want it's sort of a commercial thing. They want more people to sign up, and so they sort of make the cutoffs quite easy. But the one thing they can't control is the conditions. And so day one, we had to run 30K, and it was about 38 degrees. And I thought, I just come out of an Aussie summer, and I thought, this is going to be easy. This is going to be fine. Day 2 was 40K, I think, and we had to survive 42, 43 degree temperatures. And I was like, okay, it's getting a bit hot, but I'm okay. And then day 3, 4, and 5 were 50, 51, and 55 degrees. And on day 3, I had to run 86K. And on day 5, I had to run 45K. And I woke up with a fever on the morning of day 5, having to run 45K, and the temperature peaked at 55 degrees. And that was the moment where I just had to sort of think to myself, this is suffering. This is pure self-inflicted. It was so bad. I was at a point where if I stayed in the heat any longer, I was expecting the stage to take me about 7 hours. In the end, it took me close to 11. And that's 4 hours in 55-degree heat is like pushing me on the cusp of just passing out from exhaustion, from hypothermia, from heat exhaustion. The fever made me so nauseous that I couldn't get fluids and food down because I thought that I'd throw up. And if I threw up in that state and heat, my blood pressure and everything would drop and I'd pass out. And then it was like, okay, well, I need to get out of here really quickly. But then if I push too hard, then I'd pass out. So it was just trying to like not pass out. And I just sort of, that's when you sort of have to anchor to your why and figure out why you're doing this. And is it for other people or is it for me? And there were external factors for why I was doing it. I was fundraising. I didn't want to let people down. I'd dragged a mate along with me, Jason, who also did the race, and he was a couple of hours ahead of me. And I was like, I don't want to walk up to Jason and say, hey, I pulled out. So I was like, okay, we're going to keep going. If we pass out, then that's it, but we're going to keep going. But more importantly, I was doing this for me. I was trying to be who I thought I was capable of being. And it was, all of this stuff, being able to chat to you and talk to other people and share the story is great. But at the end of the day, I'm doing it for me. My socials aren't huge because that's not a priority for me. So having that why sort of really pushed me through. It was a pretty tough race, but we finished it. So it was pretty awesome and fundraised another 17 grand for Canteen. So at a total of 40K, which is, people do these amazing things these days, which is, it's not a lot of money, but I think, just rallying just the community with not a lot of marketing input, I think it's been really, really awesome.
But as you said, that 40,000 would have gone a long way to be able to provide those who are receiving the treatment, the social connectivity and the outsourcing that they needed.
100%. It supports all the programs that Canteen develops, the rec days, getting people together. And I'm like 100% confident the money's gone to a good place and helped a lot of people. And so, I guess that's why I'm still doing this kind of advocacy and talking about the important work that Canteen does and other organisations like them as well.
And your next feat, which is where we're going to go to, there's two things I'd love to talk about next, which is your next adventure, which is pretty huge, but also the fact that now you're working in a group called the Mental Fitness Collective, and it is about giving back on a more national level. Or at least you're coming together with people.
Well, we're starting that, right? It's and it sort of comes back to like that shift that I had post cancer of trying to live life with intention. And so I think a lot of times when I share my stories about the adventure stuff, people fixate on the fact that it is the adventure, and that's really quote unquote sexy, and it's like people think that it's really cool. But for me, it's not just about that. It's about figuring out what I want to do and then pursuing that purpose with lots of drive. And so an example is I was sidelined with lots of injuries, and then, I couldn't do any more swimming or running during COVID. I kept falling off bikes. And so my mate and I started a startup. We started making, wristwatches, and so that was sort of like a little side hustle we did, and we're still doing now. And so the Mental Fitness Collective is another sort of reflection of that, where post-cancer and post-COVID, I sort of experienced a lot of anxiety throughout that COVID period. I wasn't, I'd never suffered with anxiety before. And I sort of knew, thanks to the cancer, that, and the support that I got from Canteen, that if I want to tackle this in the right way and find proper coping mechanisms, I should go see a therapist and talk to someone. So I'm a huge sort of advocate for therapy and for counseling. And I wanted to not only get better, but find sustainable ways to get better. And so I started seeing a therapist because of that anxiety. And then really, I think around that 2020, 2021 period, started consciously working on my mental health, on my strategies, on how I, emotionally regulate, and sort of really started to, I guess probably around that time, my frontal lobe developed as a dude. So that's sort of when that hit as well. And so everything sort of came together in a way. And one of my friends invited me to this run club, and Hunter, who's the founder of MFC, is going to hate me for saying that the MFC is a run club, but that's sort of how the MFC started. It was a community that was brought together by my mate Hunter, and he basically wanted to sort of see this change where people start approaching mental health proactively. Yeah, exactly. And so that's where the name mental fitness comes from. We think of physical health and physical fitness and we think of mental health, but really we don't really talk about that mental fitness side of things. And as soon as I met the guys that, they were facilitating the run, we would have a emotional circle afterwards where people would go through a feelings wheel and try and articulate their feelings, because, there's all this science about the way that you emotionally regulate, and by identifying the feelings and sitting with it and understanding it, and, it helps you process it so much more. And so I suddenly found this group of young people that are, going at this really, really hard. And so instead of trying to do my own thing, I was like, hey, it's a good bandwagon to jump on. And so I started contributing to the team and being a part of it. And yeah, now I'm on the board. We've just been registered as a charity, which is awesome. We've got our ACNC status. And the goal is to sort of make programs and resources available. We're sort of still trying to strategize all of that, but maybe go into schools and teach young kids how to sort of all the stuff that the EQ stuff that we don't really learn at school, and people kind of have to stumble around and figure it out. I think that we can be proactive with that.
Because we do a lot in schools. They bring people in to talk a lot about things like being aware of cyber bullying and being aware of peer pressure. Now more and more schools are employing people to talk about sleep, which is fantastic, because the importance of knowing about sleep and how much you need at different times of your life. But we do it as schools do it almost as reactive, because they can see their kids are already struggling. In terms of mental health, the statistics around young people have increased exponentially over the last 10 years, over the last decade. And schools are doing all the right things. They're trying to bring programs in, or people to talk about, who to go to and who to speak to and what to be aware of. But you're saying, you're going to create things that are more grounded in hopefully recognising earlier signs. You're talking about educating even younger children before they get to that age where it's almost it's taboo to talk about the way they feel.
I don't know, we haven't really gotten that far in terms of strategizing. Like, I kind of lead product as well in terms of the services that we'll offer at the MFC, but we're kind of trying to figure that stuff out. I think one thing that a term that we use is mental reps. And so, like when you work out, you have physical reps of the exercise. So different situations will call for different mental reps. Whether maybe you're feeling a bit anxious and you want to ground yourself and be a bit more present. So maybe a mental rep there could be, all right, well, I'm just going to label the emotion, and I might do some box breathing, and there's science that backs that. And so it's trying to come up with toolkits that are really, really easily accessible and aren't, so complicated. At the end of the day, it's just trying to understand how you feel and try and counteract that if it's something that you want to change.
And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is your language. We speak so negatively.
That internal dialogue.
Yeah, we can speak so negatively, and it's natural to express negative feelings over positive feelings. Like, people say, how are you? You might say, oh, I'm not so good, or I'm feeling a bit, tired.
Yeah, not bad. Yeah. Instead of, the other way around.
Or good. Yeah. I'm tired. I say I'm tired a lot. And it's not to say that they're not, but when you say it out loud, you're just cementing that mood for that moment. I've been catching myself. So when people say to me, how are you feeling? And I'll just say things like, well, I'm working at it, today.
Just sort of shift that perspective.
Even just a little bit of shifting your language. And in the mornings when I'm getting ready, I look in the mirror and I actually say things like, you're a good person and you're going to do great today. Yeah. And I just say it to myself because I think that's really what I want to do.
And that's what you're trying to do, right? That's the whole point of this podcast, all the work that you're doing.
Instead of focusing on all the things that I'm not happy about, and as women, that list can be really long, I'm looking in the mirror and focusing on the thing that I know I want to achieve. And that is to go out there and just, even if I can be positive in someone's life, one person's life. I talk a lot about when I'm in the shops, I smile at people and people find that awkward. Like I smile at them and they smile back and you can see this awkwardness. But it's actually me saying to someone, I see you and I think I just want to be positive. I want to just smile. Or if I'm walking, if I'm doing my walks, I say good morning to everyone I walk past or good afternoon. Wow. And you catch them. Some people say really enthusiastically, they say back, oh, good morning.
Yeah.
Others actually, good morning.
Yeah.
And they're a little bit shocked.
And I think there's a couple of layers to that. I think that, society is sort of starting to lose that village feel where we don't have that interconnectedness. We don't have those third spaces and it's so hard because, we're just there's so many distractions with your phone, and just the way that we interact is sort of changing and being a bit more complex. But, you know, at the MFC, we're trying to sort of change that, and we're trying to have, instead of, you know, focusing things on going out and partying and drinking, why don't we have that same environment but at a cafe, you know, and have a boogie at 12 or 11 in the morning.
Well, that would suit my personality.
Yeah, you know, and that kind of, that third space where people can connect. And so we're kind of working on programs like that. But then that internal dialogue that you mentioned, you know, if you look at the elite athletes of the world and the way that they're trained with that psychology and that internal dialogue, you'll see Usain Bolt, if you look back at his old videos, or like all these elite runners, and they're standing there and they're telling themselves, like Cristiano Ronaldo, like, you can score goals, you know, just before he's about to take a free kick, scoring goals is normal for you. And so if these elite athletes are benefiting from, you know, all these techniques, why can't we do it? Why can't we all do it, you know?
Correct.
Because clearly it works. That's why they're doing it, and it's all backed in science. And so we're just trying to lower that barrier to entry. And I think I've got my own personal goals at the moment, so I've got a bit of a sort of lower contribution at the MFC, but I'm on the board and sort of overseeing everything.
And that's because you're aiming to do something pretty amazing in 2026. So let's finish there with this.
Yeah.
A trek to Nepal. You said you used to watch Bear Grylls, and he was one of the first to...
He was the youngest Brit at that time to climb Everest. And there was something about that show that, you know, I never went camping as a kid, but always, you know, wanted to be out there, and it just was so exciting. And over the past 6 months, I've been, you know, training to climb mountains, learn how to be an alpinist and a mountaineer. And after I did the Desert Ultra, I was like, hey, dude, this is 2 out of 3 things that you told yourself you'd do. I don't think anyone thought you'd do one of them. So let's... and
they're also different.
Let's go all in. And you know, swimmers don't run, runners don't swim. Triathletes can do a bit of everything, but they don't swim marathon distance. And I think it's kind of cool to be able to dabble in a whole bunch of stuff, but it's not just doing like the entry level stuff of those things either. It's doing probably like the hardest, not the
Extreme.
hardest. It's pretty extreme end. And you know, we've raised about 40 grand for Canteen so far, and I wanted to end this last. You know, I'm quite passionate about a whole bunch of other things as we sort of covered today, but I want this last challenge to be for Canteen Australia and
almost like completing your chapter.
Yeah, exactly right. And I want to move on and focus on other issues that I'm quite passionate about after this. And so I want to end it with a bang. And so I thought, what do I do? Everest is great, but I want to make it my own and I want to make it unique. And so I decided to follow the journey of Tim McCartney Snape, who he is the first Australian to climb Everest. He climbed it in 1984 and went back in 1990 and did a sea to summit route. And he walked basically from sea level, so from 0 meters to base camp 5,300-ish, and then climbed the mountain without oxygen. And if you know anything about climbing mountains, once you get above a certain altitude, you need supplementary oxygen. And Tim was an absolute legend of a mountaineer and a really, really fit guy, and he did it both times without oxygen. So I thought, well, let's try and break his record. Only 2 people have done a full sea to summit ascent of Everest on foot. One guy has done it on a bike, and I think someone might be trying to do it on a bike next year as well. I've heard through the grapevine. So I thought, you know, if I want to raise a lot of money and I want to, you know, really go in on this advocacy stuff, then I need to do something a bit more unique than just climbing Everest. I think a lot of people have preconceptions of what Everest is. You know, you see the headlines, you see the traffic jams up there and all that kind of thing. And I don't want to be a cookie cutter expedition client. I sort of pride myself in going all in and have a bit of ability and a bit of a resume to show that I can do the stuff that I commit to. So I decided I'm going to break the world record for the fastest time to climb from sea level to summit. So the time to beat is 3 months and 5 days. Tim walked from India to Nepal. I'm going to run it. So I'm planning to run 80 to 100K a day for about 12 days. And then I'll climb to the top of Everest. Still ironing out the kinks on how to exactly do all the climbing bit. But, you know, I'm heading off to Kyrgyzstan and in a week and a half, and I'll climb there and then back to Nepal again and try and hit my first 8,000 meter mountain. So it's all really, really exciting. It's all coming up super, super fast. And on the back of all the training, I have to try and do this crazy campaign to try and raise.
Well, that's what hopefully this episode will also help make your cause aware to other people, and we will definitely put the link to your page
Thank you
and
so
your
much.
socials on our information pages and on all of our platforms.
Thank you so much. And the goal is to try and raise $250,000 this time. So I'm going big, and I think, really trying to talk about all these things that we've talked about today, about, about young people and the support they need, about, being there for your mates and
But also having that mental fitness.
100%.
And having
it
that
all sort
why.
of comes in, and
I've heard that throughout your whole speech, which is you started talking about when you said something to me at that coffee date about being fairly average. You're a very extraordinary young man.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think everyone can be extraordinary, and that's
Exactly
the message
right.
you're making here.
Yeah, 100%. Like, people often say to me, hey, oh, you're so fit. I wish I could be so fit, or I could do this or that. And it's about the intention and understanding whether you actually want to.
They have to find their why button.
Exactly right. And whether that is starting a podcast, or it's doing a baking side hustle and doing cakes, or it's something else. Maybe you want to learn how to be a barista or make cocktails. Whatever it is you want to do, you have to sit with that thought or that desire, and then reduce the time between thought and action. And that is something that I've really made an effort to do over the last 5-6 years. Is a quote that I heard from a podcaster. His name's Chris Williamson. Yeah, he was
modern wisdom.
Yeah, so he sort of came up with this proposition of contemplating the cost of your inaction. So think about what you want and contemplate the price that you pay in your life for not acting on your goal or your dream. And that's such a powerful message, and it's kind of resonates with exactly what I've been doing for the last 6 years. I just didn't know it. And so the price that I paid by not swimming the channel or not going to run this ultra is not being my true self, and living a life that is, untrue to who I am. And at the end of the day, it's not satisfying, and I'm sort of, I'm a shell of who I'm supposed to be. So anyone can do what they want. You just got to give it a go.
I love what you just said then, which is reduce the time between the thought and the action, because you can dream about these things, but they remain dreams unless you make a set goal or a plan, an action. And I think just do one thing towards that dream. And it could be that you get a support mechanism. And if you're someone like you who said, say it's somebody who wants to try and run, well, get out there and run a kilometre. And then the next day
run for 10 minutes or go on YouTube. Like the one thing I learned at university is how to go on YouTube and be resourceful on the internet, right? So you figure out a Couch to 5K program if that's something you want to do. If you want to learn how to cook, there's so many resources around. It's just about taking action and trying.
And getting that support mechanism around you.
And then understanding that it's not the end point that matters. It's who you become, and it's the intention. So by being who you want to be and by living life with purpose, you're embodying the values that are important to you. So I can always be curious. I can always be tenacious and embody resilience. It doesn't matter if I've accomplished these goals or not. And so it's kind of about shifting the framework of the way that we think. And society these days is really driven on achieve this and that and this and that and this and that, but it's not sustainable.
So if you had any last words to share, and I think you've sort of almost said them anyway, to anyone listening, what would you say you've learned most, and what can we do today, this next moment in our lives?
I think about what you want to do and give it a go, whatever that is. Be positive, always have a glass half full approach, and just give it a go. We've got this amazing Aussie sort of attitude to just have a go, and I think that is what people just need to do more and believe in themselves.
There's no such thing as failure.
100%.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed hearing your journey, and I have resonated with it greatly because of my own family in terms of my own brother's journey. And it's wonderful to see another person grasp life, with both hands. If anything, we can come away with knowing that we do have people around us. We just have to reach out. More importantly, there are organisations out there that are willing to support. We just need to support them to be able to help those in most need. And go away and don't just dream, act. Shorten that distance between what you want to do in your life, whatever it is, as you said. It could be something small to something huge.
Yep.
Between the thought and the action, just do it.
Yep.
Sound like an IKEA, don't I? But literally just do it. And that's why that has been so famous, because it's an action.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap on another inspirational episode of UThink. Be sure to subscribe, leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to dive a little deeper into anything we touched on today, you will find links in our show notes. And don't forget to follow us on social media at Impactify AU. Until then, see you next time.